You're standing in the gardens of Topkapı Palace. The roses are blooming, but they don't distract you. Not really, because you know what happens behind those heavy walls draped in Iznik tiles and velvet. You know the stakes. Somewhere in the palace, a boy not much older than 15 is watching his brother eat sherbet and wondering whether that same brother will one day order his death. You're not in a fairy tale. This is succession, Ottoman style. There's no coronation with smiling siblings waving in harmony, no throne shared between brothers, no council of wise men voting on the best suited heir. Here, there's one sultan, and all the others spare parts or threats, and threats don't get a retirement plan. It didn't start that way. Go back far enough, and the early Ottomans followed a very different script. In the beginning, when the dynasty was young and wild, power was passed around like a family heirloom among male relatives. One prince ruled here, another there. The empire wasn't an empire yet. It was a patchwork of frontier principalities. But as the borders stretched and the sword got heavier, so did the crown, ruling together. That was a luxury they couldn't afford. The moment one prince took power, the others became potential civil wars with legs. You see this chaos crystallize during the reign of Bayezid I. When he dies in 1403 after being captured by Timur the Lame. Yes, that Timur, it sets off the kind of family squabble that leaves palaces in ruins. His sons fight for over a decade. A whole decade of brothers turning cities into battlegrounds. It's called the interregnum, but it's really just a civil war with good manners. In the end, one son, Mehmed I, wins, but he looks at the smoking mess around him and vows never again. You don't share power in this empire, you consolidate it, and so, a policy is born not written in law, not decreed in fanfare, but practiced with disturbing consistency. Fratricide. The principle is better one brother dead than the whole empire divided. Kill the competition early, and you secure the throne. Brutal, yes, but in Ottoman logic, efficient, stable, clean. You imagine yourself as a new sultan. You've just come to power. You're 19. You've grown up knowing your brothers are watching, calculating, waiting. Your father dies, some say he was poisoned. Others say it was natural causes, but no one really cares because your own clock just started ticking. You're crowned at dawn, and before the second call to prayer, you've already sent word to the Kapıcıbaşı, it's time. What happens next doesn't need to be explained. Everyone knows the drill. The princes, your half-brothers, really are probably still asleep in their chambers. Or maybe they're wide awake. Maybe they always sleep in full clothes, because they know this day would come. They hear the footsteps, not loud, never loud. The palace executioners are mute, trained from childhood to be invisible until the moment they're not. There's a phrase that dances on your tongue as you watch them disappear into the shadows, with their silken cords, Nizam-ı Alem için, Kardeş katli vaciptir, for the order of the world. Fratricide is necessary. You didn't make that up. One of your predecessors did. Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople himself, actually legalized it in a fatwa. A prince should eliminate his brothers for the greater good. The law of God bends when empire's at stake. And so it becomes tradition, institutionalized, expected. Some princes are children when they die. Others are grown men with dreams and allies and even armies. Doesn't matter. The moment you're not the heir, you're a problem. And problems are solved before breakfast. But don't be fooled, this isn't rage. This isn't about passion or punishment. This is policy. You don't hate your brothers. You just can't let them live. and sometimes it backfires. Take Sultan Ahmed IV. He doesn't kill his brother Mustafa. He breaks the pattern, maybe out of compassion, maybe out of fear. Mustafa survives, becomes sultan, and turns out not great. He talks to birds, rearranges furniture at random, and causes enough concern to be deposed twice. The system, for all its cruelty, was designed to avoid this kind of instability. So when Ahmed's sons come to power, the old habits slink back into place. Still, even sultans can hesitate. The act of fratricide becomes more ritualized, more distant. Instead of killing brothers immediately, they're locked up in a special section of the palace called the Cafes the Cage, a gilded prison, life in luxury, but never freedom. You grow up knowing you'll probably never see sunlight. Your food is served by eunuchs. Your windows are latticed. Your days dictated by the political weather outside. If the sultan dies and the court favors you, you get crowned. If not, you vanish. But in the height of Ottoman power, say, the 16th century, you don't even get that courtesy. The silk scarf is coming, whether you like it or not. And let's be clear, these aren't private, back alley murders. Everyone in the palace knows. The harem goes silent. The eunuchs bow their heads. The janissaries tighten formation. Some years, there are multiple executions. 5, 6 brothers in a single morning. One tale, whispered through palace halls, tells of a sultan who had 19 of his brothers strangled in one sweep. 19. You imagine the silence that follows. The way the air must have felt heavy, like something sacred had been stolen from it. But that's the thing. For the Ottomans, the Sultan is God's shadow on earth, and shadows don't share the spotlight. You either become that shadow, or you disappear into it. So, when you walk these hallways, these polished, perfumed, perilous corridors, you don't see a family. You see a monarchy that runs on paranoia, tradition, and the silent understanding that bloodlines must be trimmed to keep the garden growing. No one says it out loud, of course, but you can hear it in the hush, in the way servants bow a little deeper when the Sultan's youngest brother passes, in the way palace architects design rooms with soundproofed walls. The scarf waits, folded neatly, without malice, just purpose. And now you wonder why silk, why something so beautiful, so delicate, so luxurious, you're about to find out. You run your fingers over it soft, cool, and whisper light. It doesn't seem like much. This length of silk, no blade, no blood, no sharp edge, just a cord, a ribbon, something you might find draped over a dancer's wrist or tied to a noblewoman's perfume bottle. But you know better. You've seen how it's folded, handled, feared, because this isn't just silk. This is the executioner's tool of choice. This is how Ottoman princes die. You walk through the palace again, this time with a sharper eye. You notice how clean everything is. The marble glows. The air smells like jasmine water. Servants glide instead of walking, and everywhere, silence. Always silence. The Ottomans have rules, order, a craving for decorum that seeps into everything, even killing. Especially killing. A proper sultan doesn't want screaming. No pools of blood, no swords clanging against ribs, or heads thudding on stone. That's chaos. That's unseemly. If you're going to eliminate a threat, you do it with style, grace, dignity. So they pick silk, not because it's gentle, but because it leaves no mess, no slit throat, no severed head to scandalize the harem. Silk tightens fast, it compresses the neck, It cuts off the air and the blood in one silent grip, and when it's over, you can fold it right back up. You pass by the corner where the mute executioners wait. They don't talk. They don't need to. Their faces are unreadable. Their movements precise. Some say their tongues are cut. Others say they're simply trained to silence. Either way, they're the ones who do the job. You watch one of them lift the scarf with both hands, not like a killer, but like a courtier lifting a veil. There's also something else, something almost theatrical. The scarf isn't swung or flailed. It's slipped around the throat in a single motion, pulled back with synchronized precision, often by two men on either side. You don't struggle for long, 3 or 4 seconds, maybe, and then stillness, just like the rest of the palace. You start to realize this method isn't just about death, it's about presentation. The Ottomans have turned killing into choreography. Think of it as a velvet guillotine, equal parts execution and performance. But don't mistake softness for mercy. The silk doesn't care if you're 16 or 60. It doesn't flinch if you cry or plead or pray. And it never hesitates. That's the job. That's the point. The empire doesn't have time for hesitation. And there's another reason for silk, one that lies deeper, more religious, more philosophical. Islamic law has certain red lines. Blood is one of them. To shed blood unjustly is a grave sin. To execute someone in a way that spills it openly, that's worse, especially when it's your own kin. So, the Ottomans thread the needle literally. Strangulation becomes the loophole. It's brutal, yes, but it avoids bloodshed. Technically, you can almost hear the legal scholars nodding in approval. A clean death, a bloodless sacrifice, God's shadow remains unsplattered. And besides, strangulation had a long history before the Ottomans ever touched silk. You go back through Persian dynasties, Mongol Khans, Byzantine intrigues. You see the same thing, the noose, the cord, the garrote, silent solutions for loud problems. Still, even among whispers, there are cracks. The silk might be silent, but the people aren't always. Rumors begin to slither through the capital, about ghosts in the harem, about princes who die in terror, about mothers wailing into their pillows. But they whisper, only whisper, because to speak too loudly about such things, that's how your own cord gets tightened. So you tiptoe through a world where death wears perfume and walks in socks. The executioners, the Selat, never rise in status, never dine with the elite. They are invisible, necessary, feared, and when they're not strangling princes, they're practicing with ropes, with dummies, with each other. Timing is everything. If the silk slips, if the struggle gets too long, it becomes a scene, and scenes are for peasants, not for sultans. You peek inside the execution chamber, if you can call it that. No iron cages, no dripping chains, just a small, windowless room, cushions, carpets, a brazier, maybe a prayer mat, and in the corner, a folded scarf. No dust on it. It's used too often for that. You wonder what it's like, those last moments. Does the prince resist? Does he smile? Does he say his mother's name, or does he know the script too well to bother? Because here's the quiet truth by the time you feel the scarf around your neck. You've already rehearsed this in your mind 100 times. You grew up expecting it. You knew the stories. You've walked past the executioner before. You've felt his shadow. So when the scarf tightens, you're not surprised, only relieved, because now, at last, the waiting's over. And yet, someone still has to do it. Someone still has to hold the cord, still has to feel the life slip away under their fingers. That someone is always nearby. You're about to follow him next. You're following shadows now. Bare feet pad softly across cool marble. No rustle of robes, no clink of weapons. Just silence and the faint scent of amber and smoke. The man in front of you walks like fog. You can barely see his face in the dim light, but you know who he is, or what he is. He's one of them, the mute ones, the ones who never speak, never blink, never flinch. He's part of the Sultan's most trusted apparatus. Not a soldier, not a guard, not even a man. Some would say just a function, a tool, a hand that closes the chapter when words have run out. They call him Telet, executioner, but that's almost too simple. And right behind him, leading the procession, is the Kapıcıbaşı, the chief gatekeeper. Don't let the name fool you. He's not opening doors. He's delivering verdicts. He's the one who receives the Sultan's whispered order and ensures it's carried out without hesitation. Hesitation being a luxury no empire can afford. He's the project manager of death. You follow them down a quiet corridor. The walls sweat history. Every mosaic tile feels like it remembers. You've stepped out of the ceremonial court and into something more intimate, more secret. This is not where laws are made. This is where threats are erased. They don't rush. That's a part of the performance. Rushing looks panicked. This isn't a crime. This is statecraft. The Kapıcıbaşı stops in front of a carved wooden door, not too ornate, but not plain either. A prince sleeps on the other side, or waits, or prays. Either way, it's time. There's no knock. That would be saydaber unnecessary. The eunuch inside has already cleared the space. The room has been prepared, candles lit, incense burned, pillows fluffed. No weapons, no sharp corners, no open windows. It's soft, controlled, like a dream or a tomb. The mute executioners enter first, 1, 2, sometimes 3, always barefoot, always silent. The silk scarf hangs loose in one of their hands, coiled like a snake. The Kapıcıbaşı stays near the door, watching everything, saying nothing. His job is not to interfere, just to ensure it all unfolds smoothly, cleanly. This is a job that requires no audience, no applause. You stand in the corner, invisible like the rest. The prince looks up. He knows. He doesn't scream. Sometimes they ask to pray. Sometimes they curse. Sometimes they say nothing at all. But always, always, they know. There's a moment, just before the scarf tightens, when everything freezes. You can feel the tension in the room. The executioners are trained to wait for that exact beat. No lunges, no drama. One on each side. They slip the silk behind his neck, cross it, pull. No sound, and then stillness. You expect something more, maybe a gasp, a twitch, but this is not a movie. The death is fast, professional, rehearsed. The mute men hold the prince's shoulders, wait for the final breath, then gently lower him to the cushion. You realize they've done this before, many times. You wonder how they sleep. They don't clean the body. That's someone else's job. Their part ends here. The silk is wiped and folded. The Kapıcıbaşı nods. They vanish. You walk behind them through the servant corridors. No one meets their eyes. No one speaks. The Chelets have rooms at the far edge of the palace grounds. Plain stone quarters with locked doors and thick curtains. Their names aren't recorded. They don't dine in public. They don't attend festivals. They're not even really part of the court, but they are always nearby. And when they're not strangling princes, they're training, always training. You see them in the courtyard behind their quarters, practicing the grip, practicing speed. They use wooden mannequins, sandbags shaped like torsos, padded poles, not because they want to, but because the execution must be flawless. A botched strangulation is a scandal. A scream, a struggle, a visible bruise. That's failure, and failure has consequences. The palace doesn't like mess. Each cellet is paired with another. They work in pairs, always. No solo kills. It's not for safety, it's for symmetry. The pull must be even, coordinated, like drawing a bowstring. The goal is quick asphyxiation, not wrestling. These men don't fight, they choreograph. And of course, they don't speak, not just during the job ever. The mute executioners are chosen young. Some are born deaf. Others are trained into silence. Their tongues aren't cut, that's a myth. But their minds are shaped from childhood to obey, observe, and vanish. They learn to read gestures, not faces. They learn that a nod can be an order, and that breathing too loudly can be a mistake. They are loyal to the Sultan, and only the Sultan. If a Grand Vizier steps out of line, they come for him. If a powerful Pasha forgets his place, they come, one whisper from the throne, and the cord is already warming in their hands. And yet, these men hold no titles, no ranks, no pensions. When they grow too old, they're sometimes retired to distant villages, paid to stay quiet forever. Other times, they simply disappear. You begin to feel it, the loneliness of their role, feared by everyone, touched by no one, needed always, but never acknowledged. Even the Kapıcıbaşı, who holds great authority, walks a careful line. He's not a noble, not quite a bureaucrat. He belongs to the inner palace machine, a hybrid of ritual, violence, and ceremony. And when his tenure ends, he too fades into a kind of bureaucratic purgatory. There's a strange purity to their purpose. They don't write policy. They don't debate ethics. They don't judge. They deliver, and then they leave. And you start to see the architecture of death in every corner of the palace, the wide hallways that allow quiet movement, the thick walls that muffle sound, the antechambers for waiting, the doors that open both ways, so no one ever sees the body leave. You understand now the Ottomans didn't just build a palace, they built a machine that breathes poetry in the morning and delivers silk death by nightfall, a machine where every cog knows its role, where the silence of the executioner echoes louder than the speeches of a vizier, where the scarf is both blade and commandment, and at the heart of this machine, the cage. You're heading there next, past the gardens, beyond the tiles, into the shadows where princes wait to die or worse, to live. Not a literal one. At first glance, no iron bars, no chains dangling from the ceiling. The walls are smooth, the drapes are silk, the food arrives on golden trays. But don't let the softness fool you. This is the quietest form of suffocation. You walk the hall, where time doesn't move forward so much as it folds in on itself. You pass a doorway closed. Behind it, a prince recites poetry to himself. Another paces in circles, counting cracks in the tile. Another hasn't spoken in months. They're waiting, all of them, not for freedom, not for rescue, just for news. The kind that comes with a pair of mute men and a scarf. The cafes is the empire's compromise. After centuries of brothers being strangled immediately upon a new sultan's rise, someone thought maybe there's another way. Maybe we don't need to kill them right away. Maybe we can just store them. So, the cage is born. It begins under Ahmed the Forch, the one who spares his brother Mustafa, and while that mercy doesn't go exactly as planned, Mustafa's mental instability turns the court into a whispering gallery. The idea takes hold. Kill less, imprison more, keep the brothers alive. Just in case. Just barely. You stop in front of one of the windows. It's latticed. Of course, nothing clear, nothing open. The light filters in like it's been diluted. You can hear the outside world, the call to prayer, the cry of a peacock, but it never feels close enough to touch. The cafes isn't a single room. It's a section of the palace, deep inside the harem compound, reserved exclusively for male royalty who are not the sultan. They live here in luxury. Technically, cushions, baths, private tutors, but they're also under constant surveillance. No visitors without approval, no letters, no news unless someone decides you're allowed to hear it. You feel the weight of that, waiting in golden stillness for a future that may never come. Some princes live in the cafes for decades. Imagine that, being 14 and knowing you might never leave, watching your beard grow in the reflection of a brass tray, hearing about wars and rebellions from the eunuchs who bathe you, knowing that your brother who sits on the throne is deciding whether you'll live or die. And then there's the Valide Sultan. You feel her presence everywhere in this part of the palace. The Sultan's mother, matriarch, manipulator. She doesn't live in the cafes, but she might as well be its warden. Her reach stretches into every room, every whisper, every decision. She advocates, she plots, she protects, and sometimes she betrays. If her son is in power, she'll pull strings to keep rivals locked up or eliminated. If her son is not in power, she might just try to change that. The harem isn't just a place of perfume and poetry. It's a nest of political snakes, where lullabies are sung with one eye open. You step into one of the chambers, spacious, finely furnished, but still suffocating. A prince sits cross-legged on a cushion, staring into space. His name doesn't matter. There are dozens like him across generations. Some will be dragged out one day and crowned older, broken, paranoid. Others will simply disappear. There's a tale told quietly in the margins of palace history about a prince who lived in the cafes for 39 years before ascending the throne. When he finally did, he was so withdrawn, so awkward, he rarely spoke in public. His name was Ibrahim, and his reign ended in madness. Some say he filled the palace pools with perfume. Others whisper he fed coins to fish. His nickname, Ibrahim the Mad. But what do you expect from someone who grew up as a ghost? You turn a corner and see something strange. A child's toy carved from wood, worn smooth. Some princes arrived in the cafes as toddlers, their entire world shaped by walls and whispers. They're raised by eunuchs, guarded by guards who never leave. Some never even see a woman's face. Despite being surrounded by the harem, the rules are strict. No romantic liaisons, no private conversations, no hope. And still, hope lives. A prince reads books on governance. Another writes poetry to imaginary lovers. They dream of escape, of a coup, of a letter smuggled out to an ally. They know the odds are low, but what else is there to do? Sometimes, rarely, the moment comes. The Sultan dies suddenly. Illness, rebellion, poison. The palace panics. A decision must be made. And the prince, your prince, is pulled from his chamber, shaved, dressed, and marched to the throne room before the dust even settles. The guards chant his name. The viziers kiss his hand, and he becomes sultan. But he brings the cafes with him. The years of silence don't just vanish. You can hear it in his voice, the hesitation, the tremble. You see it in his policies, paranoia, quick purges, desperate attempts to secure power, because he knows what's coming. His own sons will grow up just like he did, locked away, afraid, waiting. This is the cycle. And you realize the cafes isn't mercy. It's just slow motion execution, a death stretched across years, masked in comfort, and it does something strange. It warps the very idea of leadership. You don't raise strong rulers in cages, you raise survivors, and survivors rule with fear. You pass one last door. Inside, a young man sleeps with a dagger hidden in his mattress, not to fight off assassins, but to end his own life if the scarf ever comes. A way to claim control in a world where everything's decided for you. And as you step back into the corridor, leaving the cafes behind, you feel the air shift, lighter, sharper. The cage stays with you, though. The soft tragedy of it, the idea that the most powerful empire in the world at its peak relied on this invisible prison to keep itself from unraveling. But things won't stay this way forever. You can feel it already, winds changing, traditions fraying, the scarf, the chelets, the cage, all of it begins to wear thin. You're still in the palace, but the air feels different now, staler. The tiles aren't gleaming the way they used to. The fountains still trickle. The call to prayer still floats through the courtyards, but the tension has softened. The empire's pulse has slowed. You can feel it in the stone. The silk scarf, once taut with purpose, now hangs a little looser on the hook. You're at the edge of a long era, the part where empires start to blink, wondering how they've become what they are. Fratricide hasn't disappeared. Not yet. But it's hesitating. Hesitation is dangerous in Ottoman politics. And yet, here it is, creeping into the corners of decisions. You're watching the sultans grow tired of strangling their brothers, not because they've become gentler, no, but because the cost has changed. The empire is no longer surging forward like a cavalry charge. It's slowing down, looking over its shoulder. European ambassadors are everywhere now. French, Venetian, English. They write letters home about the palace, about the food, the art, the politics, and yes, about the princes who disappear. These letters ripple across Europe. And suddenly, the silk scarf isn't just a policy, it's a scandal. You imagine a court advisor whispering into the Sultan's ear, "Your Majesty, the French are calling us savages again." And that whisper matters now. The Ottomans once didn't care what Europe thought, but now, the balance has shifted. The empire is no longer the unstoppable force. It's part of a world stage, and the audience is watching. So, the bowstring starts to retire. You see it in the reign of Sultan Mahmud II. He doesn't strangle his brothers. He locks them away. Sure, but there's a reluctance now, like a tired ritual that no longer brings comfort. The Kapıcıbaşı still exists. The executioners still train, but they're called less often. Some start to age out without ever pulling the scarf. The machine is winding down. And with the end of fratricide comes something even stranger, peace. Not everywhere, not in the provinces, not in the streets, but in the palace. For the first time in centuries, princes start to live full lives, albeit quiet ones. They read, they study languages, some even compose music. They grow old behind those latticed windows. The cafes doesn't vanish, but it changes. It becomes less of a death sentence and more of a retirement plan, a soft prison. The silk cord that once defined succession fades into a folded memory, still feared, still rumored, but no longer guaranteed. You look around the palace and see rooms being repurposed. The old execution chamber, now a records room, the training grounds for mute men used for storage, and the executioners themselves. They're dismissed quietly, or given roles that don't involve strangling anyone. One retires to Anatolia. Another becomes a minor official in a fishing town. Their faces blur into history, the way tools do when they're no longer needed. You feel the ghost of them in the halls, though silent, barefoot, ever watching. Even if they're gone, their presence lingers. The palace has memory, and memory is hard to evict. Still, times change. The Tanzimat reforms sweep through the 19th century like a wind through old drapes. The empire, now more bureaucrat than conqueror, starts drafting constitutions and tinkering with civil codes. The sultan becomes less shadow of God, more symbolic manager. The idea of executing your brothers, that's not just brutal, it's unproductive. You sit in a cafe near the Galata Bridge, watching steam rise from your cup, and overhear two students debating succession laws. They speak of enlightenment, of justice, of progress. You smile, knowing just a century ago, one of them might have been strangled in the night for simply existing in the wrong family. Then comes the final crack. In 1908, the Young Turk Revolution. The empire gasps, reforms tighten, and monarchy itself starts to wear thin. And in 1924, the final curtain falls. The Ottoman Sultanate is abolished. The bowstring, already dust-covered, is formally retired. No more princes, no more cafes, no more velvet deaths in candlelit rooms. And now the scarf hangs in museums, displayed under glass, labeled in careful script, execution bowstring, Ottoman period. Tourists stare, puzzled. It doesn't look dangerous, just elegant. They don't hear what you hear. You still hear it. The silence before the act, the breath that never finishes, the footsteps fading down the corridor. But now the scarf is a relic. The princes are gone. The palace is a memory machine, and all that remains is the echo. You pause in the courtyard, where a cypress tree leans over the tiles. You look toward the chambers where brothers once waited for death or waited for news that meant they'd keep waiting. And you wonder, what kind of empire designed such a system? What kind of power requires silk to keep it from unraveling? You don't have to answer. History already did. It tells you this: the Ottomans survived because they were ruthless. They thrived because they believed in order above all. And they declined, slowly, when they realized the price of that order had become too high even for them. So the silk was folded, the executioners dismissed, the cage unlocked, and the empire, once held together by whispers and velvet cords, finally let go. I'll leave you here, at the edge of the garden, listening to a breeze that no longer carries fear. We're always saying goodbye.